Fuller said, "There are certain distinct convictions of the white people that must be taken account of. The Dutch as a class say that it can never be right to teach the native or to make him a Christian. Their position is that he is either not human or in some ways is of a lower humanity than the white man. The colonials as a class say that the native has been spoiled and is being spoiled by education. The educated K-word is a good thing made utterly worthless. But both the Dutch and the colonials know the value of the K-word as a laborer. And from that point of view, they treat him well. As they put it, they treat him very much as they would their horse or their dog." Sanmanan Dumilang, hello. Molweni Ikamalam Gulwazi, and last year I deconstructed my faith. I've slowly been sharing the things I discovered in that time. So the first missionary to arrive in the Cape Colony was Van der Kemp, and he landed in 1799 from the London Mission Society, which I'll be referring to as the LMS. And this is his experience. At his first meeting with Ncika, Van der Kemp handed over the chief's tobacco box filled with buttons and then had a long silence while an interpreter who could speak Dutch at last came forward. In answer to Ncika's queries, Van der Kemp said that his object in coming was to instruct him and his people in matters which could make them happy in this life and after death, and that he only asked to settle in the chief's land, expecting his friendship, protection, and liberty to return to his own country when he should judge it expedient. To the interpreter De Baez, Van der Kemp said that he supposed he understood these things. "The Lord sent me to preach the gospel to this people after I shall have attained their language." "This I know," replied De Baez. "The gospel must be preached to all nations. But you are come at a very improper time." Ncika agreed that it was an unfavorable period because of the frontier hostilities. Not even he could find safety, and he advised Van der Kemp to leave. Nonetheless, he allowed the missionaries to unspan their oxen and pitch their tent. The chief was highly suspicious of the missionaries' motives, believing that his coming was a political strategy devised by the English to betray the Xhosa. Van der Kemp came under considerable pressure from his own party too. They pressured him to return to the colony until it was safer. Surprisingly, De Baez stood by him and finally forced the issue, threatening to leave Ncika and return to his family in Tembuland. Grudgingly, the chief gave Van der Kemp permission to settle on the other side of the Keiskamma River. They called Van der Kemp Nyengane, meaning the one who appeared sneakingly as if by accident. Sir George Young, who took over as governor at the end of 1799, was extremely hostile to missionaries and accused Van der Kemp of propagating rebellion among the Xhosa instead of Christianity. In April, Ncika ordered Van der Kemp and his companions to move to Debe. In the next 4 months, they came under constant pressure from Ncika and his armed warriors, and the missionary was forced to move twice more. 2 months later, there was yet another plot to kill him as a conspirator against the king. He notes in his journal that Satan roared like a lion, but 2 days later, the plan for killing him was laid aside by a wonderful interference from God. During his mission to the Xhosa, Van der Kemp suffered at the hands of the colonial fugitives too. He had narrowly escaped being ambushed and murdered by 4 of them on the way to Ncika. And although they later attached themselves to him and professed regard, they criticized his egalitarian approach to the indigenous people. And they frequently stole Van der Kemp's goods. The Xhosa also stole his oxen, while wolves carried off calves and sheep, as well as food and clothing from his tent. Ncika's place was now the center of attraction. All the minor chiefs made frequent visits to the station. There was always one of Ncika's counselors who attended and told the news the missionary had brought. He related to the visitors how the man came there suddenly and told them of the Qamata whom they did not know, although they used his name. He tells us that God made the earth and the heavens. He tells us about the great Sfubasibanzi, the savior of the world, who came to this world many years ago and was killed by the enemies of Tamat. How he rose from the dead and ascended to heaven. How he has sent the missionary to tell Ngiga that he will come again, and all who practice witchcraft will be swept away as before a mighty wind. These things were ubuqi, mysteries. Our fathers never told us about them. We know something about death, and we know that our ancestors are living somewhere, but we could not tell where. Nyengana has come to tell that good people go to God after death, and the bad ones go to the place of Iztunzela, where there is a big fire kindled, and they burn as we burn amagweja. The missionary Nyengana has stolen here to give warning. One old man warned his neighbors that such useless speculation would ruin the Xhosa because their children would neglect the cattle. Another old man said that he had gone once or twice to hear the missionaries, but he could not understand what they were saying. He said, therefore, he discontinued his visits, though he believed them to be a good kind of people who did him no harm. The extremely liberal Reverend Reed was loved by the Xhosa, whereas the activities of Thompson, official government agent among Amangqiga, and Aleph, who supported Amampingu against the Xhosa, made them hated. Shaw, whose people were not raided by commandos, did not have the same problems as the capable and liberal Ross, whose assistant was once asked, "How many are these gospels that you preach?" "We ask because Somerset came and said stop doing evil, and yet he kills people every day." When the troops expelled Maqoma from the Cat River, the most Ross could do was ask them not to burn huts on the Sabbath, and even this was disregarded once his back was turned. Gianni Chachi, the Christian chief, asked why not do the missionaries first go to their own countrymen and convert them first. The first converts were mainly misfits in the Xhosa nation. They were disfigured people, whether albino or leprous. A lot of them were people who had been overcome by the fear of death, and large amounts of women came to the stations trying to escape unwanted husbands like the Liberate or Impundlo. In the romance of South African mission, Fuller wrote, "I was spending Holy Week in a native town. There were many Christians there, and we had daily services in preparation for Easter Communion and Easter baptisms. We were doing all we could to realize the greatness of the greatest Sunday in the year, when after the sorrow of Good Friday, our Savior rose again and brought hope and gladness to the world." Of course, Sunday is a new idea to the heathen. All went well. The people gathered early on Easter morning to worship the risen Christ, and after our first service, I came back to the chief's kraal where I was staying. There I found soldiers standing about. English officers were seated at a table in the courtyard, and there, on Easter Day of all days in the year, they were showing their utter disregard of every Christian instinct, destroying all the reverence for the day which we were teaching by holding a court for the collection of the hut tax. Prominent theorist of settler colonialism, Lorenzo Veracini, has noted that settler colonialism is not always genocidal. However, this is often because settlers failed to eliminate an indigenous group completely, as opposed to the settlers not trying. In the Cape Colony, the extinction of the San was widely anticipated, including by those who were appalled by the prospect. The debate over the imminent disappearance of San and possible ways to curtail this, while still facilitating San incorporation into the colonial economy as laborers, resulted in diverse views and speculation over San provenance. The debate that developed concerning the likelihood of Aboriginal peoples to convert to Christianity and adopt its markers of civilization was contested between missionary, settler, and British colonial government circles. Missionaries were convinced of their moral authority in the settler colonies. However, like other colonialists, they also sought to attain authority over indigenous people. Yet they attempted to simultaneously fend off the most destructive forces of settler colonialism. The vibrant missionary movement in the Cape Colony became embroiled in defending the humanity of the San, and importantly, in advocating for the recognition of San subjecthood. The superintendent of the LMS, Dr. Philip, in Researchers in South Africa writes, "While our missionaries are everywhere scattering the seeds of civilization, they are extending British interests, British influence, and British empire. Wherever the missionary places his standard among a savage tribe, their prejudices against the colonial government give way. Their dependence upon the colony is increased by the creation of artificial wants. Industry, trade, and agriculture spring up." Philip said, "They will be more productive. There will be an increased consumption of British manufactures. Taxes will be paid, and farmers will have no cause to complain of lack of labor." In April 1805, Van der Kemp wrote that his main purpose in forming Hottentot missions was as much as possible to bind the Hottentots to the government of the land, while Philip wrote, "Mission stations are the cheapest and best military posts that a wise government can employ to defend its frontiers against the predatory incursions of savage tribes." In the Romance of South African Mission, Fuller wrote, "Ethiopians are not born but made." What happens? As soon as the native has arrived at the mine, he finds himself quartered with 10 to 40 others in a big room. The following day, he is allotted to his European mine boss, and for the first time in his life goes underground and awaits for instructions. He is shown a machine drill or an iron jumper and hammer, and his boss tells him to start work. The probability is that he will understand nothing, and the white man promptly boots him to quicken his wits. This is new to the raw K-word, and he merely regards it as a new experience. He will bear a great deal of it. The K-word gets used to being knocked down, beaten with a shambag and jumper even, sworn at continually in the most disgusting language, and from that moment, he is an Ethiopian. Africa for Africans. They start always with a great respect for the English king and English people. They're willing enough to regard them as great and good and to fit to their ways. But they find on all sides brutalizing treatment, which on the mines, on the farms, and in the towns is creating, manufacturing Ethiopians by thousands every year. I know that this is kind of scattered. I'm reading from different pieces, and I'm hoping that you will put it all together. And with that in mind, I think that the picture you will see is that missionaries propagated Christianity, but they weaponized the civilization of the natives through Christianity as a reason why the colonialists could not wipe out the natives. But they didn't fight against the system. They didn't see the inherent exploitative nature of capitalism. I am so tempted to just start adding scriptures that are against greed, against slavery, scriptures against injustice. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I charge every single Christian to reflect on their beliefs and to reflect on the Christianity that they live out, and to see whether or not they stand for the truth, whether or not they're on the side of goodness, or if they protect greed and they protect those who commit injustices